Let's be honest, the term ABG can make a lot of us a little nervous. Arterial blood gas interpretation can seem really confusing, but I promise you, once you get the basics down, it becomes one of the most powerful tools you can have in clinical medicine. So let's dive in and demystify this thing together.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down what an ABG actually is. Then we'll get into the why and, just as importantly, the why not. After that, we'll walk through the procedure itself. Then comes the fun part, making sense of the numbers. And we'll wrap up by looking at a few common pitfalls to avoid.
So first things first, what exactly are we talking about when we say arterial blood gas? Let's break down the core components of this vital test.
An ABG is exactly what it sounds like, a blood sample taken directly from an artery. Now, you might be asking, why an artery and not a vein? Well, it's because arterial blood gives us this crystal clear picture of how well the lungs are working before the blood gets to the tissues and they start using up oxygen and dumping CO2. It's like a perfect snapshot of a patient's respiratory and metabolic status in that exact moment. Okay, so you get the results back, and it's a list of numbers. But that's pretty useless unless we know what each one represents, right? So what do these core values actually mean for our patient? First up is pH. This is simply a measure of how acidic or alkaline the blood is. The easiest way to think about it is this. The more free-floating hydrogen ions you have, the more acidic things get. So a pH below 7.35 means the patient's blood is in a state of acidosis. And if it's above 7.45, we call that alkalosis. Next is PaCO2, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. This is our respiratory value. See, CO2 is a waste product from our cells. When we breathe normally, we just exhale it. But if a patient isn't breathing effectively, that CO2 builds up. In the blood, it acts like an acid, pushing the pH down and causing what we call a respiratory acidosis.
And that brings us to the other side of the coin, HCO3, or bicarbonate. This is our metabolic component. Bicarbonate is the body's main buffer. It's managed by the kidneys, and its whole job is to neutralize acid. So if your bicarbonate levels are low, you've lost your buffer, and you can end up in a metabolic acidosis. And finally, we've got PaO2 and SaO2. Both of these tell us about oxygenation. PaO2 is the amount of oxygen gas that's just dissolved in the blood plasma. SaO2 is probably more familiar. It's basically what a pulse oximeter reads. It's the percentage of your hemoglobin that's actually carrying oxygen. Both are absolutely crucial for figuring out how well a patient is oxygenating.
Okay, now that we know what we're measuring, let's get into the clinical decision-making. When should we actually order an ABG? And, just as important, when should we absolutely not?
This really is the million-dollar question. To draw or not to draw? We do it to check for things like low oxygen, to see if a patient with COPD is retaining CO2, or to diagnose something like diabetic ketoacidosis. But on the other side, there are some serious deal breakers. If that modified Allen's test is abnormal, meaning there's poor collateral and blood flow to the hand, you stop. Same goes for an infection right over the site or severe vascular disease. It's just not safe.
All right, we've decided it's necessary and safe. Let's walk through the hands-on part, how to actually get the sample correctly.
I just mentioned the modified Allen's test, and it is so important it gets its own slide. Seriously, before you even think about poking the radial artery, you have to do this. It's a safety check to make sure the ulnar artery can supply the hand with blood all by itself, just in case something happens to the radial artery. If the test is good, you proceed. If it's abnormal, it is an absolute no-go.
So, where do we get the sample? The radial artery in the wrists is the go-to choice, hands down. Why? It's easy to get to, it has that great collateral circulation we just confirmed, and it's usually more comfortable for the patient. Of course, there are other sites, but for most cases, we stick with the radial.
The procedure itself boils down to 4 main steps. 1. Sterile prep of the site. 2. Careful insertion of the needle into the artery. 3. Collect about 2 or 3 milliliters of blood. And 4, and this is so important, once the needle is out, you apply firm direct pressure for at least 5 minutes. No peeking. This prevents bleeding and a nasty hematoma.
Of course, in the real world, it's not always so straightforward. You might have a patient in shock with weak pulses, or maybe obesity or swelling makes it impossible to feel the artery. When you're in a tough spot like that, don't forget about ultrasound. It can be an absolute game changer for finding the artery and guiding your needle safely.
Now, while the procedure is generally very safe, you need to be aware of the risks. Most of the time, you're looking at minor things like some pain,
bruising or a small hematoma. But we also have to be vigilant for those rare but really serious risks, like an infection, nerve injury, or even compromising blood flow to the limb.
And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. We've got our sample, the lab sent back the results. Let's finally learn a simple way to make sense of it all.
Before you can spot what's abnormal, you have to know what's normal. These are the numbers you need to burn into your memory. A normal pH is between 7.35 and 7.45. PaCO2 is between 35 and 45, and bicarbonate is between 22 and 26. This is our baseline, our foundation for everything else.
Okay, here is a super simple three-step approach. Step 1, just look at the pH. Is it low, telling you there's an acidosis, or is it high, pointing to alkalosis? That's your primary problem. Step 2, look at the PaCO2. Does it explain the pH? For example, if the pH shows acidosis, is the CO2 high? Step 3, look at the bicarbonate. Does it explain the pH? If you have acidosis, is the bicarb low? Whichever one, the PaCO2 or the HCO3 matches the direction of the pH problem, is your primary disorder.
We're almost done. Let's just quickly cover one last critical topic: how to make sure the numbers you're working so hard to interpret are actually accurate in the first place.
You've got to handle the sample correctly, or the results are worthless. You see those tiny air bubbles in the syringe? They can make your oxygen reading look falsely high. Or if the sample sits around for too long at room temp, the cells keep using oxygen and producing CO2, completely skewing the results. So the best practices are simple: get all the air bubbles out immediately, get the sample on ice, and get it to the lab fast, ideally within 15 minutes. So let's end with this thought. An ABG is so much more than just a set of numbers on a lab report. It's a real-time window into your patient's most fundamental physiology. Mastering it lets you see what's really going on inside and helps you make critical, life-saving decisions.